Hi, it's Ingrid Blackburn. Today we're going to work on a fun, vibrant mixed media project. We're going to do a little bit of watercoloring with some embossing paste. So why don't we go ahead and get started? I added a little bit of temporary adhesive to the backside of this watercolor paper. This is a 140-pound cold press paper. And I'm going to use a little bit of embossing paste onto my project. So I have this great stencil by this Crafters Workshop. This is Specimens, and this is the 12 by 12 inch stencil. So now that I have that kind of secured, I'm going to add a little bit of masking tape just to make sure that my stencil doesn't go anywhere when I add the embossing paste. I'm just going to kind of make sure that everything stays put. It does have a tendency to kind of move around. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of stencil over both of these images. Originally I was thinking I would just do the butterflies, but I thought it would be kind of fun just to kind of have a little bit more texture. So I think what I'll do is I will actually shift this a little bit more. I don't want the butterflies centered, but I've got these great little kind of lines here, so I thought that would be kind of nice, and this other texture on this side as well. So it's a little off-centered. I have some just regular white embossing paste by Dreamweaver, and we're gonna open that up. I have a little that got colored on that side, which is a little blue, and might as well take that. Mixed media, I don't really care if it's got color in it. Normally I'd be going for white, but we're gonna do a little bit of watercoloring over this, so it doesn't really matter to me if it's got color. So I'm just adding this down, and you don't need a lot of embossing paste, but you do want it to kind of spread around and kind of fill in all those gaps. So I'm using a palette knife here just to get a nice coverage, make sure I have nice even paste down. Perfect. Now that I have that, I'll just plop that back in there. And then with embossing paste, you want to clean your stencil and your tools immediately. Now, when this is wet, so what I want to do is I want to make sure that this lifts up immediately, and when you do it, you want it to be straight. You don't want to go on an angle because you'll end up getting a weird smear or smudge with your embossing paste. So let's lift that up, and you can see we've got this great texture on here. Now I'm going to set this aside for about an hour and allow that to dry, and then when we come back we're going to do a little bit of watercoloring. So now that we've given this a chance to dry, you can see here we've got this really great texture, and we're going to do a little watercolor painting over that. I'm going to start with my lightest shade, which is going to be a lemon yellow, and this is a lemon yellow by Schmincke. And I'm going to go direct to paper. We're not going to make our paper wet, and I have a rather wet brush. I just want to add some really nice, bright, vibrant yellow to the center of the butterflies here. And I'm not worrying so much about, you know, exactly where it needs to be, because I just kind of want this to be somewhat of an organic piece. So from there, we're going to go into the translucent orange, also another color by Schmincke. And you can see I'm coming in rather dark, and I want this to be nice and vibrant here. When I think butterflies, I think yellow and orange. Now we can also blend some other color in that and come back over with a little bit of water just to kind of blend those colors a little bit. And you can see how the embossing paste really holds that texture, and it's really pretty. It doesn't look like much right now, but in the end it will be something that's really pretty. Now we're going to come in here. This is Permanent Rose. We'll just add a little bit here to the outside of the butterflies. I want to have a fair amount of water on my brush here, since our paper is totally dry, which means it's very thirsty. Just want to add a lot of paint here. And this isn't the only rose that we're going to add. You can see I kind of contaminated my little amount that I have here, which is fine. I'm going to come back in now with a little bit of magenta, and this is another color by Schmincke. Actually, this one, that's actually quinacridone violet. So this is magenta. I love this color. It's just so bright and vibrant. It's gorgeous. Let's add a little here on the outsides. Just kind of want this to be a beautiful, bright, kind of summery piece. Now I'm going to come back in with a little more lemon yellow and just kind of add a pop and kind of blend the colors a little bit together. You can see I've kind of gone over the yellow bits that I have, and that just creates a really beautiful blend here. I don't have my watercolor paper actually adhered down. I should have smushed it down. I still have that on the back, but it doesn't seem to be sticking. Probably would have been smart to actually get this adhered down. Add a little yellow and some more water there to the end, just kind of blending those colors. The nice thing about the embossing paste is it really holds this texture, so you have these gorgeous images. And I just want to add, kind of brighten this up a little here on the outsides. And that's working for me. I don't want to blend everything. I want a little bit of the color to kind of remain on its own. So we'll add a little here, a little more of that magenta. And then we'll bring in some of this quinacridone violet. Let's lighten that up a little because it's rather dark. I don't want it to overtake everything. It's quite a bit of purple. And perhaps add a little bit of blue. I have some cobalt here. Another nice vibrant. Over here I have this kind of like timepiece, different texture. So we'll just add a little bit, something different. Keep the butterflies a little more on the yellow side. Kind of blend these two. The purple and the blue together will make a really nice indigo, darker shade of purple. Let's add a little bit more magenta to it. Kind of get some beautiful shades going on. So we have the dark and a little bit more of light on this side. Now I have different parts of this that have started to dry, and I don't want to get any really harsh lines, so I'm kind of being a little careful here. If I'm coming back into an area that has dried a lot, then I'm going to come back over the area in general with a little bit more of a wet brush, just to make sure that everything kind of has that nice soft look to it. I don't want any harsh lines. Keeping my paint very fluid. And I think what we're going to do to kind of balance this out a little bit, we're going to add a little bit of gray here and a little bit up here, just to kind of frame it in a little bit. And this is Payne's gray. I don't ever really use black. You can create your own black, but I'm just going to add a little Payne's gray here just to kind of darken it up and give a little bit of a frame to it, and that's going to help draw the viewer's eye into your project. So we'll add a little water here, just kind of blending that out. We'll take a little bit more Payne's gray. Oops, throw that down on our palette here. Add a little here to the upper corner. Just kind of blend that out a little. I think what we'll do is we'll come back in with a little bit of magenta. You can see my waters are getting rather dirty. A little more magenta here, just to kind of get that gray. I had a lot of water here, so if you come back in with just a wet brush, you're going to actually pull up your paint if it's just water, like you just saw there. So I want to come in with a little more color here, a little more pink on this side, just to kind of make it a little bit more of a cohesive piece. And then we'll blend that out. We'll take a very, very wet brush. I want that to be relatively clean. Pull some more magenta here. And I find that when I'm working with my pans here, sometimes it's a little easier just to spritz them, just to kind of get that water going. And then I have a real wet brush. I'll throw a little bit of more water, blue on there, to kind of blend that. There we go. You have all those colors kind of coming together. And if you have anything that kind of turns muddy that you don't really like, don't be afraid to just come back over it with a clean part of a paper towel and just kind of dab that up. Okay, so I'm kind of done here. I've got a little bit of light still in there with the yellow and kind of got the darker corners and just a lot of color going on. And you can see we still have that great texture going on. It's kind of hard to tell right now. It just kind of looks like a little bit of a mess. But we're going to come back over once this has dried up a little bit and add a little glitter to our actual images. Now I'm wanting to just kind of brighten up a few areas here. So I'm bringing a little bit more lemon yellow back in here now that this has kind of dried a little tiny bit. And it's not going to make it totally bright, but it will brighten it up a little, which is really what I'm looking for. And then just kind of blend that out a little too. So that gives it a little bit more of a uniform look here. Maybe add a little tiny bit up here in the corner. Now we'll let that dry, and before we move on to the next step. Now that I've allowed this to dry, I did actually take a heat tool and kind of futzed with it a little bit here on the corners. I added a little tiny bit more of the Payne's gray and a little bit more of the magenta here just to blend that in and make sure I didn't have any harsh lines. I did a little bit more up here too because I wanted to deepen that a little bit, just kind of framing that. I'm really loving the painted quality to this, and the texture is very cool as well. I think next what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of stamping to this. Now it is relatively dry. You can see it got really warped here. That's okay. First off, we're going to do some stamping, and I have this background stamp, or kind of, I don't know if it's a background stamp, partial background stamp by Kaisercraft, and this is just a basic script, but what I love about this is it's clear so I can see it. And so we're going to add a little bit of black soot here. And I want to use distress ink to do this because when I add some flicking to this later on, I want to make sure that this kind of blends out. I don't need it to be perfect. And I'm not going to put this on an acrylic block because we have this great texture and everything going on here. You know, I need to kind of get past some of those grooves. Now I'm still going to use my paint, but I'm not going to use it right at this moment. And I don't really want this to be totally perfect here at the edge, so I'm going to kind of remove a little bit of the ink. Or just kind of, you can also use your fingers if you want to just kind of, you know, remove some little spots. And then we'll just add a little bit here. And I'm just going to kind of press down in the areas that I want the ink to kind of get to my project there. So this way it's not perfect because I don't really want that look. But at the same time, I don't want to spritz this because I don't want it to be that watery. Just kind of want a little bit of script in certain spots. And you can see here, any place that you don't really want it to look so perfect, you can just come in here with a little bit of water on a towel, because this is actually distress ink, and distress ink does react with water really well. So let's actually take a little brush and we'll just kind of paint some of that away where you don't really want it. I want it to really be blended. And what's great about this is it'll just add some darker kind of spots to this, and that's perfect. So I'll speed this up as I finish this on the rest of the project. I'm adding just a little bit of lemon yellow in there just to kind of make that a little brighter again. I have a little bit of the wet stamped image in there, but it got a little too muddy with some of the black there when I added some water. So that's pretty good. I like just that little tiny hint of stamping in there. That works for me. It's these couple areas that are kind of stark. I think what we'll do is we'll just kind of run a brush over them just to kind of get them to run a little bit and not be so perfect. And that'll work. Now next I'm going to add some flicks to this. I don't want it to overtake it, so I just want a little bit. So we'll just kind of grab some of this Payne's gray. It's nice and dark, and I think the Davies gray is a little too light for this. So I just want to get quite a bit on my brush. Now you can always tap it on there just to see how it's going to look. That was a little too much. That's okay. And those spots that already have some of that paint are not quite dry, you have that in there. Now, if you added a little too much and you wanted to kind of take a little bit away, you can always just come back in here with a clean part of a paper towel and just kind of pick that up. Something that doesn't really feel right. You might not remove it all, but you'll probably get rid of some of that. That's looking pretty good. I like that. Has kind of that nice splat feeling to it. I think I just want to have a little bit up here in the corner. There we go. And just a little bit down here. Just kind of tapping my finger. It's nice and easy. And I like this. This is a great background. I'd like to refresh my images with the stencil. So to kind of create a frame and add a little bit of finishing texture to this, we're going to take some of the hickory smoke first, and we're just going to add a little bit of sponging here in the corners. Actually all around, just to kind of frame our work a little bit. Don't be afraid to add distress over watercolor. It's also a watercolor medium. It's blending really nicely. I've got this great watercolor paper, and you know, that may not be a type of paper that you usually use when you're using your sponge tools. And we'll come back in with a little bit of black soot as well, just in select places. I don't have this completely down. I have this on an angle just so I'm kind of getting the edges, because I don't want to add too much of this. I don't want to darken it up that much. But in these areas where I have that Payne's gray, I definitely want to add that. You can see that it really has a very nice blend, and it kind of takes over those areas a little bit, giving us a little bit more balance in our project. Because we have this nice bright part, but yet I kind of still wanted that artsy, real mixed media feel to it. So now that I have this down, I want to add a little bit more of the removable adhesive. Just really want this to stay put. I don't want this to go anywhere. And then I have my stencil, which when we last used, we used some of the embossing paste on it. And I'm just gonna find my images here, get that exactly where those images are. And then we'll want to get this taped back down so that it doesn't go anywhere. Now originally I was going to add some glitter, but I think really looking back at it, I'm going to add a little sponging instead onto my textured embossing paste. So I'm going to come back in with hickory smoke first. We're just going to bring these images a little darker, and this will give it a nice contrast to the bright colors underneath. And you can do this really anytime with any of your embossing paste and selectively color your embossing paste this way. Just going back over it with a rounded motion here. You can always just pounce it in too if that's easier for you. And then I'm going to come back in with a little bit of soot black also. And just to get an idea of what this looks like, let's just lift it up on the one side, leaving the other one down, and it's got kind of got that smoky gray feel to it. I like that. I think I want that to be a little brighter. So I'm going to take my black soot and I'm going to go a little more direct to paper. Kind of just pressing that directly on there. So you have that sponged feeling underneath, and now I'm going to have create some interesting texture by just pressing that in there. And we'll see what that looks like now. I like that. It's got a really nice cool feel to it. And you can kind of see some of the areas are a little bit darker than the others. Some are a little bit more lightly sponged, which gives that interest as well. And you've got this really nice, bright, vibrant colors popping out from behind. Very cool. Now I did decide that I do want to add a little bit of glitter to this. Not a lot though. So I'm going to place my stencil back down. I'm not going to worry about securing any of it. Just want to get it down on the general area where that is there. First I want to make sure that my project is completely dry. Very important. Otherwise we're going to have a glittery mess. We'll have glitter everywhere. Now that that is zapped with a gun, a heat tool, we're going to just use a destatic tool all over the card because I don't want any of the glitter to get in all the places where I don't want it to be. So I'm just going to, now that I have my stencil secured in place, I'm just going to take a Versamark pad and I'm just going to smush it onto this part here, and that's just going to stick to where the textured paste or embossing paste is. Lift our stencil back up, and we'll add some glitter to that. So we have some glitter that's stuck to the embossing, the Versamark pad, and we'll just kind of give that a little bit of a zap. And then I'll throw a little bit of the clear embossing powder on there as well. Just kind of have that stick in certain areas that I'll grab onto a little bit of it. My goal isn't really to have such a completely glittery piece, but just have it in certain spots. And now that we have that done, I'm going to go back over this, and it's just going to wipe away some of the glitter and some's going to be left behind. And I'm just kind of trying to get rid of some of that heat and that destatic powder that was down there, because I didn't really want a completely glittery piece. I just wanted a little bit of a hint of glitter, and that's perfect. So the combination there of just a little bit and then a little bit of the embossing powder, that clear embossing powder, just to hold it, some of it in its place, and that's perfect. That's exactly what I was going for. And that's a beautiful mixed media background. Now we'll just add a sentiment. So now we'll emboss this in black. So when embossing on vellum, you want to preheat your heat tool for about 30 seconds. That way you're not keeping it on your vellum too long, because vellum can very easily scorch. Nice solid sentiment that will be easily visible and kind of stand out from the background. Now obviously I don't want to hide this entire piece, and that's why we're going to do a little tearing. So once you've allowed that to cool a little bit, you can tear. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to tear with my right hand. If you're left-handed, you'll just tear with the left. The key is to tear towards you to get this really pretty character on this side of your paper. And I want to kind of do this in a rounded motion. I don't want it to have too many peaks, and I want to keep it somewhat close. This is a little too close, but that's okay. Somewhat close to my greeting. And then we'll just rotate it and do the rest. I want this to look a little more fluid, so not quite so many jagged edges. So I just want to kind of free tear this. And there we go. And you can see I'm not really hiding too much of my background here, and it gives me a little bit of freedom for where I want to put it. Over here is not really where I want it. I want it right here, because I have kind of this really big light spot here, and it doesn't really serve the purpose of the project for me. For me, that's my least favorite spot on this. It's absolutely gorgeous. So we can do this. And because it's so nice, bright, and vibrant, it really pops out from the back. And when I adhere vellum to projects like this, I always want to bend them. And then I want to use a bone folder just to kind of make sure that I'm getting a really good crease, and that helps my vellum to stick to my project and help it to lay a little flatter than it normally would on its own. So there we have that. And look at that. I mean, that's just gorgeous. I love that. Now it's kind of in that top third, which is the rule of thirds, which is one of those kind of design laws that you want to kind of adhere to. It's not really overtaking any of the butterflies. It's straddling a couple of them, but not really taking over anything. If you wanted to have a little bit more show, you could always tear a little bit more. And then we're gonna add a little adhesive on the back and get this matted onto a piece of cardstock. Now you can see here I have two different backgrounds. I have a white one, and you can see how this looks on it. The white kind of really stands out and doesn't really work with it. Yes, it's a nice neutral, but here's a black background, and you can see because we have this dark Payne's gray here in the corners, and with the soot black over it, that actually kind of works a little bit better. And the colors are actually a little more vibrant. Show you half and half here. You see how this is a little bit more vibrant than right here? So your backgrounds do matter. And you just can put a white panel on the inside. And I am going to offset this. It's 4 inches wide by 5.5 tall. So we're just going to have 1/8 of an inch here and a little bit more on this side. And just trim up this bottom. So I added some glue to that, and just to kind of get that really adhered, I'm just going to take a bone folder here on the inside and just kind of run that back and forth. Then I'm going to trim this up with a paper trimmer just to make sure that that is completely straight. So I took off a little tiny bit here at the base after adhering it with some glue, and you can see it kind of took a little tiny bit of that sponging away. So I'll just take this black soot, and I'm just going to run this, because this is so white here at the edge, I'm just going to kind of run that along the edge there just to darken up that cardstock. You want to be careful because you don't want to get onto your project too much. And then at the same time, I'm going to take a sponge tool and just add just a little tiny bit more of the sponging, just because I probably took a little bit off, and I'll just kind of deepen that up a little bit, and that's perfect. You can do the same thing to the top if you need to, but in this case I think we're good. Enjoy these close-ups right here. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. I would greatly appreciate it. That tells YouTube you want to see more content from me. And